It is Friday, July 19th, 2024 at Protestia Studios, and this is your intelligence briefing coming to you from protestia.com, where, as always, you can go to find the latest in Christian polemics and discernment news. Sign up for our insurgency email blast to stay informed of what's going on out there that the mainstream media doesn't want you to know about, and support us financially over at Patreon, patreon.com/Protestia, starting at $5.95 a month, where you can get... you can sign in with your Patreon account to protestia.com to avoid the ads if they bug you. And if they don't, feel free to keep reading with the ads. We appreciate anybody who's reading the website and benefiting from what we do. This ministry is intended to keep you apprised of what's going out there in the broader Christian conversation and the broader, really the world conversation from a biblical worldview, and make arguments for it and provide you the information and evidence you need to make arguments for it yourself. We're going to be talking about one thing for this intelligence briefing. We got one headline for you, and it is Elevation Church. Headline is High-Tech Sheep Stealing? Elevation Church accused of using location-based ads to geofence other churches and steal their congregants. Elevation Church in North Carolina has been accused by one pastor of high-tech sheep stealing, claiming the popular megachurch is using geofencing technology to intentionally target smaller churches with location-based ads, ensuring that as soon as congregants step foot on to their own church property, they are pushed advertisements intended to draw them away. This is Dr. Michael Kelly, lead pastor of Central Triad Church, a growing congregation nestled on the outskirts of Winston-Salem, North Carolina. In a recent sermon, he revealed to his congregation that a few years ago, in 2018, he was looking for ways to help grow and promote the church. And he invited, quote, this is his quote, invited someone who worked at ABC News to come to our church and give me some ideas on what we could do for advertising. Actually, let's move down to the article can be read over at protestia.com. Right now it is the lead article at Protestia, but let's listen to this pastor in his own words.
Vision to grow. We have a vision to grow. Every church that is of God should grow. Now, I know of churches who've grown that, you wonder how. Wonders why. It's a country club situation. I don't know, should I tell this, Lord? A few years ago, I actually came across I was looking for advertising plans. And I was trying to find a way to advertise. We did a lot of productions here at the time, so I was looking for ways to advertise. And I invited someone who worked at ABC to come to their church and give me some ideas on what we could do for advertising. I've never told a story publicly. Get ready online. And so she sits in my office and we're talking, and she says, well, you could always geofence. I went, what is a geofence? And so she begins to explain to me how they would do it. You pick an area, and everybody with a smartphone that walks in that area starts getting notified of your ads. Like, for example, if you owned a tire store over here, and you had a competition with a tire store across town, you would geofence their location, so everybody walking in their place looking for tires would start getting ads from your tire place over here. That's what's happening a lot of times when you go places, and you don't know why you got an ad on your phone. It's because you went somewhere that got geofenced to inform you about some other place.
Now let me stop right there for a second and explain. So geofencing advertising doesn't mean that when you enter a geographic location, ads just start popping up on your phone randomly. That's not what it means. But what it means is that if you pull up a website or an app or something like that serves advertisements, online advertisements, it is more likely to pull up an ad when you're in this geographic area. The ads that are geofenced or that are specific to that area are more likely to pop up, or they pop up only in those areas and not other areas. Online advertising can be very specific to demographics, to search engine history, like what you've been searching for. And in this case, if you give it permission, and many smartphone users do, you give it permission to use your location to target ads towards you. And so like I've purchased geofenced ads before, not for Protestia, but for other businesses and things. It's a very common thing to say, for instance, if you have an electronics store or something, you might run advertising and you specify that advertising to only be available to or only bid on advertising that pulls up when the given user is in a certain geographic area. And you might say, hey, that geographic area is going to be when they're in other electronic stores. This is very common, and there's nothing wrong with it inherently. But listen to how he describes this in the church context.
And I said, well, that's interesting, geofencing. So how would a church use that? She said, oh, it's simple. I said, well, how's that? She said, well, I was in charge of all the geofencing for a much larger ministry that I'm not going to name at this very moment in Charlotte.
So he kind of names them. People in North Carolina know what the large ministry in Charlotte is. They know who that is.
I'll stop there. She said, I was in charge of it, and we would geofence all the churches. And I said, I'm sorry, what? She said, yeah, when we launch a new campus somewhere, we would go in and geofence all the church locations in that city, so whoever would go to church would find out about this new church. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm not quite getting what you're saying. She said, it's a built-in tithing base. So I said, help me understand something. You're telling me that you are literally advertising in other people's churches so you can take their members and not reach the lost. This is a true story. I'm telling you an absolute fact. And I said, I want you to know right now, that's what I would call unethical, biblically and spiritually. That is not right. So, when I finished talking with her, I called up the local campus pastor and had a meeting with him. He wasn't expecting this, but I did it. And I said, I know you're just the campus pastor. You don't have all the details. You don't know the number. I said, but I want to know, have you geofenced my church? And he just paused. And I explained it. He said, oh, we wouldn't do something like that. I said, okay. Why don't you ask your people? He sent a text off. At the table, the message comes back. He starts reading out loud. He didn't read it before speaking to me. Reading it out loud. In reading it out loud, he reads, we don't geofence by the name of the church, just by the church itself. In other words, it didn't care what kind of church it was just a church. So we geofence every church. The name, I said, have you geofenced Central Triad Church? Oh, the name doesn't matter. It's just the church locations that we geofence. I said, so every church in this area has been geofenced by your ministry. And here's what I told him. I would rather you bring signs and come stand in a parking lot and let everybody know you're here than to do what you're doing right now. It's unethical and it's wrong. And then I said, you go ahead and call the powers that be and get Central Triad Church out of your list. True story. I tell you that because there are people building churches whose purpose is not the lost. Oh, come on, somebody. It's not the lost, it's to get, it's to gain, it's to get, it's to create, it's to pull, it's to destroy. It's to destroy churches. Wasn't that fun to hear? Wasn't that interesting? That's just a true story. You can do what you want to with that. I have no animosity. I just brought.
So I do have some animosity. Now he's mentioning that at the end, I do have some concerns with this that are just beyond, sort of suggesting that it's a problem. So you remember what this is. This is a church. First of all, a church deciding that it needs to advertise itself using traditional advertising means. That's debatable whether that's something that churches should be engaged in for the purpose of getting attendees on a Sunday morning or drawing people to the church. Now, if what this pastor is saying is like, hey, they were looking for advertising for, say, some Christmas program, or they're doing some evangelistic outreach, I wouldn't say that that's categorically wrong, but when you have other churches that decide, or they're going to have a church plant. In this case, it's Elevation Church. We all know this, and they say we're gonna plant another Elevation, an Elevation campus church or whatever over here. They go into a geographic area, and they say we're not going to advertise just in the blanket area. We're not going to go into a town and say let's advertise all over this town for people to come to our church and be aware that it's here. We're going to not advertise where there are no churches, so that we can use that money and that funding to advertise where there are churches. So you're going into a town and you're saying, we're not going to make the assumption that other churches are full of Christians. And granted, obviously, we all know that there are places that call themselves churches that we would say are not real churches, and they're not full of Christians. And so it's we could have the debate of whether advertising should be targeted to those places. But if you said, all right, we're going to take every Christian church in the area, every church that calls itself a Christian church, draw little circles around those churches, and we're only going to spend our advertising money to the people physically in those churches. And if they're not physically in that church, they will not see our ad. They will not know about our church. You cannot reliably say that this is some sort of evangelistic enterprise. What you can say is this is a way to try to lure people in other churches away from those churches to come to your church. And like this advertising person that the pastor was talking to said, it's a built-in group of people who already tithe. So you can't reliably say this is about evangelism, but you can reliably say this is about money. This is about what we like to call sheep stealing, where we're going to say, hey, by the way, church attendee or church member over here, did you know that there's a cooler, hipper, more awesome church over here that you can go to instead that has better music and better lights and a better production and a better this and a better that? That's all you're doing. Again, this is Elevation Church geofencing their advertising to other churches is a tacit statement that they are interested in drawing away tithing members of other churches, not reaching lost people or the unchurched, as church marketing, purpose-driven types would have you believe. These churches, these mega churches, very often, in fact, too often, most of the time, are growing because they are siphoning off people that were members of other churches or attendees of other churches, not because they are growing because they're evangelizing the lost. That's a misnomer. And this is just further evidence that is happening. Now, this gentleman here, Pastor Kelly, he put out a message, and we have a quote of this. I'm not sure if I have a link to the original message, but the quote, he said, reflecting on, this is from our article, reflecting on the situation 6 years later, because this, I think Kelly had preached this or talked about this. I think he talked about it recently, but the actual event itself happened a while ago. But he had this admonition and encouragement for pastors toiling and laboring under the shadow of megachurches that frequently suffocate small congregations and suck all the oxygen out of the room, writing on Instagram. So this was from his Instagram or maybe the church's. He said, to every church that has been destroyed by the juggernauts, and to every minister and pastor who has asked the question why and how this is happening after years of work and labor, to see people run to a bigger thing because it walked through doors and announced itself secretly. To all the pastors out there who have given all you have through prayer, blood, sweat, and tears, working unthinkable hours to see souls saved and the church disciplined. Thank you for being honorable, ethical, and godly. Keep working, pastor. Keep giving and don't quit now. Keep trusting God. Keep believing. God knows and he has seen. Stay humble no matter what and keep reaching the lost. We are not perfect, but we are not thieves and robbers. God will provide, and we will see the mighty revival that God has promised. I did not share this as an attack, but I believe this will encourage many that have wondered how and thought perhaps it's because they weren't good enough or loud enough or bright enough. Comparison is the thief of joy. Now go be joyful about the field God has called you to harvest. Without knowing too much about this church or this pastor's positions on a lot of things, that is generally the proper and correct position. God giveth and God taketh away, and our job is to be obedient. Our job is not to be marketers and trying to build financial influence for ourselves or our church or our parachurch ministry, certainly not through directly targeting other churches. And Elevation Church apparently has been doing this for quite some time. Probably not surprising any of us that know anything about Elevation Church that they would find this acceptable. We do not find it acceptable. We find it reprehensible. And we would ask that if you know about any other churches in your area doing this, we would be happy to speak to you about it, because this is wrong. And part of what we do here at Protestia is expose things that are being done that are wrong and sinful and not in keeping with the general equity of Scripture, the teachings of Scripture in terms of ecclesiology, what is going on in the church. Thank you for tuning into this intelligence briefing for Friday, July 19th, 2024. Stay tuned to Protestia for all of your latest in Christian polemics and discernment news. Have a good weekend. Go to church on Sunday and worship with the saints. As always, Semper Reformanda.